Good morning, everyone. Thanks for being here today. My name is Janine Benner, and I'm the Board Vice Chair for the Pacific Northwest Hydrogen Association, as well as the Director of the Oregon Department of Energy. We are so excited to be here this morning with you and share more about the Pacific Northwest Hydrogen Hub and our plans for Phase 1. I'm really pleased to be joined by Chris Green, the Pacific Northwest Hydrogen Association President, Kate McAteer, our Community Benefits Lead, and April Sims, who is our Labor Representative. So each speaker will be sharing more about their focuses for Phase 1 of the Hub as we go through this webinar. What you have in front of you today is our agenda, and we're just moving on to the next part of that, which is our project timeline. So just for background, I'm sure many of you have been following this, but last October, the Pacific Northwest Hydrogen Association Hub was selected by the U.S. Department of Energy as one of 7 clean hydrogen hubs nationwide. Now, DOE's investment in regional hydrogen hubs is one of the largest investments in that agency's history, and it will form the foundation of a national clean hydrogen network. So after many months of planning and negotiations with the Department of Energy, the Pacific Northwest Hydrogen Hub received Phase 1 award status from DOE on July 24th. And that actually made us the second of 7 U.S. regional clean hydrogen hubs to move into Phase 1. As part of this designation, the Pacific Northwest Hydrogen Hub will receive an initial amount of $27.5 million in federal funding, with up to $1 billion expected over the life of the project. And that's outlined in the bipartisan infrastructure law, which authorized DOE to provide us this funding. So all of this money from the feds will be matched by industry partners up to $125 million in Phase 1 of the project. Now, Phase 1 is expected to last between 12 and 18 months and will encompass initial planning, permitting, analysis, design, and community and labor engagement activities to ensure that the overall hub technology the overall hub concept is technologically and financially viable with input from relevant local community partners. So that's a little bit of background on where we are and how we got here. And now I'm going to turn it over to Chris Green, who's the president of our association, for more details on the hub and what to anticipate in Phase 1.
Thanks a lot, Janine. Appreciate the introduction, and thanks for all your leadership so far on all this work. For folks that I haven't met, my name's Chris Green. I'm the president of the Pacific Northwest Hydrogen Association, and am basically, with the support of our board of directors, leading our effort to bring all of these projects to fruition and bring the Northwest onto the global map of one of the key places of the hydrogen marketplace globally. I wanted to spend a little bit of time before we get into some of the details on some of the other aspects of our entire hub, just talking about the background and sort of what our hub is. And so it's a pretty unique and very large scale public-private partnership. Basically, that's what it is. We got a lot of great folks together from tribes, labor leaders, environmental organizations, private sector companies, government officials, and got a big group together and basically said, hey, if we all work together, maybe we can compel the Department of Energy to give us $1 billion, which they did, and hopefully help us go build out all this infrastructure around the Northwest. For us, it has there's lots of benefits and there's lots of reasons to do this. Of course, folks know that, of course, in Washington and Oregon and in lots of parts of the Northwest, we have very, I'd say, aspirational goals of how we decarbonize industry and transportation. We've got laws on the books now that make sure that we're going to be able to reduce CO2 emissions, make sure our grid is a little greener, and make sure that we can have, a good environmental stewardship and reduction of climate change as we think about the next several decades where we have these challenges. So very important for us to really focus on those kinds of things. Hydrogen is a very important part of that. We have lots of ways that we are going to and can decarbonize with various technologies, but hydrogen is one of these great products, one of these great fuels that can replace things like diesel or natural gas in some places. And so when you think about really big boats, really big trucks, really big pieces of equipment, places where you put diesel right now that they can't easily be plugged in somewhere to draw electricity, hydrogen is a great asset for us. So it's part of this overall decarbonization strategy, and it has this added benefit of creating these green jobs of the future that folks talk about so much. And so there are great opportunities for new jobs and job creation as we go forward. Our hub is like most of the other hubs. There are 6 other hubs around the country. Ours is comprised of a few different states. So we have projects in Washington, we have projects in Oregon, we have a project in Montana as well. And we're looking forward to building out the connectivity of that region and being able to hopefully someday connect our regional hydrogen economy to places like California and Salt Lake City and over further into Montana and the rest of the United States. So we're really excited about partnering with such a big group to try to achieve some of these goals. I just want to say a few more things about the kinds of projects that we've got. We do have some projects that I think are going to help decarbonize things like fertilizer, which is a fossil fuel heavy industry. So we have a green fertilizer project. We are looking at ways to use hydrogen for energy storage. And so folks know that we are doing a lot of work in our region to bring on new renewable assets. We need solar and wind, clean energy generation. We need lots of it. But that comes with challenges that are different from like a dam or like a nuclear power plant that have firm, constant baseload power. Those other renewable sources have some variability. So energy storage is a very important part of that too. We're also looking at how we can impact different parts of the value chain, particularly in the transportation sector. So transit and trucking fleets, those kinds of things, we think are great opportunities to transition to cleaner fuels like hydrogen. And we've got lots of opportunity for that with all of our ports and infrastructure we've got in the Northwest for those kinds of things. But it's not just about the kinds of projects. It's not just about building hydrogen, getting hydrogen products into the market. We are also really focused on making sure we have high quality, good wage jobs in this region. You're going to hear a little bit more about that in our partnership with labor a little bit later in this webinar. But we are right now, I'd say a quite conservative estimate from us is that we think there will be about 10,000 high wage jobs that are created as a result of this hydrogen hub. And so we're quite excited about that. I've spent most of my career, if anybody knows me or has worked with me in the past, working on trying to get new high wage jobs into this region. And to me, it's one of the legacies of this. If we can decarbonize, if we can reduce emissions and clean up our environmental emissions and create high wage jobs in the future, it's just it's a no-brainer. So we've got to work on this stuff. It's really that important. So in addition to all those things, we've got a lot more that we have on the plate that we want to try to continue to push forward. I'd say, in general, we are very committed to green electrolytic hydrogen. That's what we committed to the Department of Energy. And so our hub that we have proposed is consistently green and electrolytic. There are other kinds of hydrogen that you can make out there. But for us, that's the direction that we are headed. We think that's the best way to produce hydrogen into the marketplace. I want to scroll down a little bit to maybe get into some of the projects, I think, here. Can we go to the node map? There we go. Okay. So I want to talk a little bit more about just our region and the map and sort of what kind of projects we have. And so I'll just go through some of the nodes that you see here on the screen and give a little bit of an update. Node 1 is a node that we've been working on for quite a while, and it's really focused on clean hydrogen for heavy duty transportation. And we think there's going to be some ability to get some good supply out there from that. We are right now currently evaluating some adjustments or changes possibly to node 1 and maybe an expanded look about where node 1 will have impacts outside of just the southwest region of Washington, but expanding and looking at opportunities across the region. So that node is going through an evaluation a bit. We'll probably have more updates on what that looks like in the coming months. But we're really excited about being able to get that node going. We also have node 2 up in the Ferndale region in Whatcom County, Washington. And so that's led by ALA Renewables, and very excited up there as well to get new green hydrogen produced into the market in that part of the state, and be able to produce a slightly different version of hydrogen as a liquefied. So a lot of the hydrogen we produce is going to be a gaseous form. Being able to liquefy hydrogen and condense it and store it and then move it in that condensed liquefied mode, I think is also going to be very helpful. And it opens up lots of possibilities to get that product to different parts of the market. And so there's certainly possibilities to displace different kinds of more carbon intense hydrogen in some of the fossil refining industry. We think that's a good opportunity. There's also opportunities there, we think, for supplying transit and trucking and those kinds of fueling station opportunities that we're going to need to look at. So node 2 is a pretty good deal. I think we're pretty excited about it. And we're quite also excited because of the opportunity to really boost some jobs up there. I think some folks know about the Intalco facility up there that had to be idled several years ago. And so this is a really great opportunity to replace some of those jobs up there. So we're pretty excited about that. Moving on to node 3 down in the Boardman, Oregon area. So just kind of on the border of Washington there, Washington and Oregon there. We've got a node there led by Mitsubishi, and they're working with Portland General Electric as well. So we're really excited about the ability to produce more hydrogen in that part of the state. And as you can see, and you're starting to see already on our map, this was part of our strategy and our thought process, which was to think about these important transportation corridors. So we've got some facilities on I-5, on I-90, but those I-84, I-82 corridors are also quite important. And we think there's a great opportunity there to have some supply in that part of the state that will also be able to go toward heavy duty hydrogen trucks or refueling stations or other kinds of heavy equipment in that part of the Northwest region. Moving on, I'll just mention a little bit here about node 4. So this is in the Tri-Cities area of Washington, or Richland, Washington. And this node is led by a company called Atlas Agro that is doing some absolutely fantastic work and is going to produce green hydrogen in order to take that and use it as an input to produce ammonium nitrate. So this is fertilizer. So this is basically the project that is displacing the fossil-based inputs into fertilizer. And folks know that's a pretty fossil-intensive industry. What a great opportunity this is for an area of the country that is, as I'd say, economically supported and reliant on agriculture. It's a very important part of all the Northwest region, and being able to offer a new and innovative product that is a greener product that is in, of course, constant and high demand like fertilizer, I think is pretty exciting. So we're really looking forward to the work that they're going to do down there. Moving on just a little bit further to node 5. Based in the Baker City, Oregon area. A really great company called Novo Hydrogen is going to be working on producing green hydrogen in that part of Eastern Oregon. And there's some great opportunities that they're pursuing for heavy duty transportation usage. So getting more hydrogen fuel cell trucks on the road that will replace diesel or other fossil propelled pieces of equipment. We're also quite excited about. So looking forward to some work down there. And getting some more economic development in Eastern Oregon, we're really excited about. So really glad about progress going on in the node 5 area. And then moving back up to Boardman, we have another project there that's node 6. And this is going to be another green hydrogen producing node there that's going to get some more hydrogen into the marketplace. Again, heavy duty transportation is a really big part of what we think we can accomplish there, and getting 100% green hydrogen there, I think, is going to be really helpful as we get more product into the marketplace. Mention a couple more real quick, and then we'll turn to some other remarks here in just a moment. But node 7, we're really excited about this. This is a node that's going to be down in the Chehalis, Washington area, and really looking at public transit. So Twin Transit's been a great leader of the transit agency in that part of the state to really try to push lots of transit agencies to thinking more about fuel cell buses for transportation. We have lots of electric buses in our state, and they work really well. There, in some cases, there's an opportunity to have a little bit longer sort of routes if you have fuel cell buses, because they can go a little bit farther without having to fill up again. And of course, it's a little bit faster in general to fill up with hydrogen, which only takes a few minutes, or just kind of like pumping gas into your car, than it is sometimes to recharge an entire electric bus. And so we're really excited about that ability for more of those electric buses to be proven out, hydrogen fuel cell buses to be proven out and then distributed hopefully around the region, so we can start to decarbonize our transit agency operations. Last and certainly not least, we're very excited as well about Node 8, a project over in St. Regis, Montana, that we were enamored with from the first time we learned about it when we were evaluating all of these projects. But we're excited about the ability with some solar electricity to produce green electrolytic hydrogen over there in Montana. Again, following this strategy of trying to get more hydrogen into the market on really key corridors, so that I-90 corridor, very important to us. And these are sort of the first steps, I think, to being able to connect some of these hubs nationally. And so we're definitely having conversations with the folks in the Heartland hub that cover a little bit of the eastern part of Montana and over in North Dakota. And so we think there's some good opportunities to get a flag in the ground out there in St. Regis, Montana, and produce some of this green hydrogen that's going to go help decarbonize some heavy duty transportation vehicles out there. I'll just make a couple more quick notes here before I turn it over to Kate McAteer from our Community Benefits Program, who's going to tell us a little bit about the work that we're doing there. And I just want to mention, this whole operation, this entire hydrogen hub program is it's not going to be easy to do. We have to basically create supply and demand for a new energy commodity at the same time. And that's not been done, as far as I know, anytime recently. And so there's a lot of work to do there. There's no doubt lots of work to make sure that the economics of these projects actually work. We need private sector companies to put money up to make this happen. I think it is a quite wonderful thing that the federal government has invested so much money in hydrogen. But for the $7 billion or so that the DOE has put toward all of these hydrogen hubs, there's another $30 to $50 billion in private sector funding behind that. And so, as we've always talked about, this green transition, this focus on all this climate change technology and all the work that we need to do to decarbonize, absolutely will have to be done in partnership with the public and private sectors. And so we think our hub has a good chance of doing really well, but it's going to take a little time and effort and vision to try to continue to make this stuff happen. So we're going to keep working on it. There's lots of work we have to continue to do, but we're excited about the work that we're going to do here, and really appreciate everybody's interest in our hydrogen hub. And hopefully you'll hear a little more from us, and we'll answer some questions later. So thanks a lot, and I'll turn it over to Kate.
Thank you, Chris. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon if you're further east. So I'm Kate McAteer. I'm the Community Benefits Lead for the Pacific Northwest Hydrogen Hub, and I also serve as the Vice Chancellor for Academic and Student Affairs at Washington State University's Tri-Cities campus. So you heard about the technology from Chris. Community benefits is also an essential part of the Pacific Northwest Hydrogen Hub, and also required for funding from the federal government. So Washington State University and the Consortium for Hydrogen and Renewably Generated E-Fuels, which I will refer to as CHARGE from now on, we will oversee the community benefits plan for the hub. So the Community Benefits Plan aligns with the Biden-Harris administration's Justice 40 initiative. And in doing so, we are committed to engaging communities to define and quantify the benefits for the communities that Chris talked about earlier, really to avoid disproportionate burdens on those communities, and to really track and monitor and to ensure that 40% of the benefits off the federal funding will flow to disadvantaged communities. And some of these benefits include the creation of more than 10,000 jobs that Chris talked about, but also the development of STEM-based education programs from K-12 through college and university, to really ensure a pipeline of trained and qualified workers that will build and construct these projects, and then operate and maintain the hub's hydrogen projects well into the future. So in addition to workforce development, the Pacific Northwest Hydrogen Hub will be incorporating community input, your support, your concerns into decision-making to really promote accountability and equitable distribution of benefits. During phase one, we will be monitoring and receiving feedback from you on siting decisions, concerns that you have about our projects, priorities that you want us to put forward as community benefits, and really engaging with not just communities, but our tribal communities and also labor unions and workforce development organizations to really ensure that we are doing local hiring, fair wages, and benefits, and ensuring that the benefits flow to those communities. So the Pacific Northwest Hydrogen Hub's community engagement plan is really organized to ensure that we get stakeholder participation and communication at all the projects that Chris referenced in that map earlier. Local community engagement teams will work at those project sites to really get feedback from communities on issues, on Justice 40 objectives, on workforce concerns, and then what are the opportunities for those communities. As the lead for the community benefits plan for the hub, together with other hub community engagement specialists and some of our partners, we will be participating in these public listening sessions that are held by our project community benefits leads. So additional Justice 40 commitments that will be included in our initial assessment of the Justice for the Justice 40 plan. In addition to workforce, we're going to be talking about socioeconomic benefits, reduction of environmental burdens, and in some cases, remediation of contaminated brownfield sites, such as the aluminum smelter that Chris referenced earlier, and some of the remediated Hanford reservation sites. So there will be 8 community advisory boards established, one for each of the nodes that we talked about, that will be composed of representation from these host communities. It will include tribal representation and representation from labor groups. So each community advisory board will establish a clear process for gathering information from its host communities, really listening to the public's concerns, discussing potential project plans, and providing continuous updates on not just the hub as a whole, but also each project's status. I just want to point out some of the activities that we've already established while we've been going through negotiations with the Department of Energy. So I just want to point out a few that have been happening. And the first is up in Ferndale, Washington, which is Node 2. They are engaging a community benefits agreement committee with the Opportunity Council in that area, which is a community action agency that's representing Whatcom and the San Juan counties, that provides free recruiting and employer services for low-income and disadvantaged individuals. Out in St. Regis, Montana, in Node 8, they're developing a community-based approach for engagement, for hub engagement, that's really based on lessons learned by the Horn Rapids Solar Storage and Training Project. All of our project partners really encourage participation and dissemination of information through town halls, through webinars such as this one, and meetings with community leaders, so that we are really soliciting lots of stakeholder feedback throughout this process, phase 1 and beyond. And we will be doing public-wide announcements for opportunities for engagement locally and through our website. I also want to point out that the hub will be launching a public data reporting platform to really enhance transparencies, where people can go and get updates on project status and provide that feedback. We will also, on that platform, provide information about those community advisories, those community advisory boards that I referenced, who's on those boards and how do you engage with them. Then in later phases of this project, We will be obviously doing data reporting, including metrics about our community, tribal and labor engagement, about our workforce development progress, including, updates on job numbers, how are we engaging with tribes and how are we impacting those tribal regions. And then we also will have a diversity, equity, inclusion, and access plan, or DEIA, to again really ensure that we are aligning with the Justice 40 initiative to ensure the benefits are flowing to disadvantaged communities. In terms of our labor engagement, you're going to hear more about that shortly from my colleague April Sims about what we've done to date and what we plan in the future. Before I go on to talk about tribal engagement, I do want to point out that there is a form on our website at pnwh2.com where you can submit your contact information and your interest area for community benefits, whether that be workforce or environmental, whatever your interest might be. And we will also be publishing dates for community meetings, town halls, etc. On that website. So I'd now like to take a few minutes to talk about tribal engagement. So ongoing dialogue with tribal nations has been fundamental from the initial conversations about this hub, from its vision and to its anticipated success. We have been and will continue to engage with tribes and tribal-led organizations at the hub level through state and tribal liaisons to really learn and understand the concerns and the interests in all aspects of the hub, but especially in the regions of those tribes whom we're talking to at that time. So many of the nodes that Chris referenced earlier are located near tribal land, and we actually have identified 15 tribes and tribal nations for involvement, but obviously any tribal nation in the Pacific Northwest or tribe that's interested, we welcome your participation. The project, the Pacific Northwest Hydrogen Hub, has received initial support letters from the Confederated Tribes of the Chehalis Reservation, the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation, and the Cowlitz Indian Tribe, and the latter actually sits on the Pacific Northwest Hydrogen Board. Up in Ferndale, Node 2 is engaging with the Lummi Nation and the Opportunity Council to increase the representation of diverse individuals on their Community Benefits Advisory Board, and later getting more of that feedback for construction and operations. Node 4, excuse me, which is in the Tri-Cities, has introduced the project to the Intertribal Advisory Board, or what's called the ITAB, which is a group of the Hanford tribes, including the Confederated Tribes and Bands of the Yakama Nation, Confederated Tribes of the Colville Reservation, the CTUIR, which I talked about previously, the Wanapum Band, and the Nez Perce Tribe. In Node 6, there's engagement with regional tribes to really discuss project development, hydrogen safety, job creation, and potential workforce development opportunities for tribes in that region. In Node 7, there's active engagement with the Confederated Tribes off the Chehalis Reservation, the Cowlitz Indian Tribe, and the Cowlitz-Wakakum Council of Governments to really foster collaboration early and include their input in project planning. Out in Node 8 in Montana, there's a strong connection with Missy Cool, who's the director of the Montana Department of Indian Affairs. She represents all 8 tribal nations in Montana, and really the goal is to provide tribal connectivity to the Pacific Northwest Hydrogen Hub for all of them through their relationship with Node 8. I want to point out that the Hub Community Benefits team includes Professor Zoe High Eagle Strong from the Nez Perce Tribe. Zoe is the Washington State University Vice Provost for Native American Relations, and in that role, she oversees the university's Office of Tribal Relations, which has an MOU and active relationships with 13 regional tribes whose ancestral lands predate and cross modern state boundaries. Unfortunately, Zoe couldn't be with us today, but we will be hosting a webinar for tribes and tribal nations in the near future. And I want to just, again, point out that more information about that webinar, the date, the times, and a link to register will be posted soon on the website. So I'd now like to turn it over to April Sims, who will be sharing more information on the Hub's labor plans.
Thank you, Kate, and good morning or afternoon, everyone. My name is April Sims. My pronouns are she and her, and I serve as president of the Washington State Labor Council, AFL-CIO, which is the umbrella labor organization in Washington State. I also have the privilege of serving as the labor representative on the Pacific Northwest Hydrogen Board, and we are excited to be a part of this work. The Pacific Northwest Hydrogen Hub is developing pathways to careers in clean hydrogen workforce and anticipates creating more than 10,000 union and high road jobs over the project's lifetime. The Hub and its partners are working on a big picture roadmap that features seamless on and off ramps, allowing people to leave the workforce and return without penalty, such as parental leave. We're working on facilities advancement. For example, a high school graduate or an entry-level worker that seeks to advance in the industry but needs additional training or a credential, some upskilling or reskilling. The Hub will also work with colleges and universities to be more accessible, like awarding credit for prior learning and flexible schedules. Job development will include apprenticeships, college and university programs, and will promote diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility, often referred to as DEIA, in the workplace. The Hub plans to foster a diverse workforce through an education and training coalition, which includes MSIs, or minority serving institutions, and tribal colleges. The Hub will also capture plans, services, and goals in staffing plans and workforce development plans to develop how the Hub will access our skilled and trained workforce upon operation. Ongoing labor activities for the Pacific Northwest Hydrogen Hub will include supporting a coalition of colleges and universities to develop curriculum, supporting educators on content delivery, and supporting clean energy STEM academics. Investing in more than $4 million in worker training and apprenticeship programs, coordinating with the Renewable Energy Vehicle Infrastructure Technician, also known as REVIT, on workforce training program with certificates and degree potential, expanding Career Connect Washington funded programs to give high school students hands-on experience, such as pre-apprenticeship or internships in the industry. Transportation stipends will also be available for students to ensure access to jobs. Providing students and their families with college and workforce readiness programs at participating MSIs in partnership with organizations such as Mid-Columbia STEM Foundation and the Benton Franklin Workforce Development Council. In the next few months, we will be facilitating meetings between unions and developers to discuss project labor agreements and labor harmony agreements and ways to engage in the upcoming work, with the goal of ensuring that these investments result in good union jobs that pay a livable wage and provide a glide path to the middle class. So please watch for updates and more information on this by going to thestand.org, which is the Washington State Labor Council's daily newsletter, and where we will be sharing information and updates on these efforts. Now I'll pass this back to Janine Brenner to moderate the Q&A portion of this webinar. Thank you.
Thanks, April, and everyone for sharing a little bit more about the Hub. We are going to now move into the question and answer portion of this webinar. And I just first want to thank everyone who submitted questions in advance. We received a lot of questions, so unfortunately we won't be able to address everything live today. But we did select a handful of the most asked questions, and then we'll be following up with written responses to all the questions submitted after the webinar. And if we have time, we will also be able to get to some of the questions that are coming in on the Q&A today as well. So if we could go to the next slide. The first question I'm actually going to ask to Erin Fever, who's the Executive Director and founder of Charge. And the question is, what businesses and organizations can get involved in the Hub? How can I get my business or organization involved? How can I find out when RFPs are active? So Aaron, maybe you could actually start with the brief introduction of Charge for people who may not be familiar, and then tell us a little bit about how businesses can get involved.
Absolutely. Thanks, Janine, and thanks to all our speakers thus far, and really appreciate the fantastic attendance that we're seeing from everybody out there in the audience, and some really good questions. So yeah, I wanted to introduce Charge real briefly first. Charge, thanks to Kate McAteer for introducing the acronym. It saves me from doing that. But Charge is an innovation cluster organization. We were founded by our parent organizations, JC Dream, which is an organization that focuses on critical mineral issues across all of clean energy and transportation, and Washington State University. And both of those organizations were really instrumental in getting Charge started actually many years ago, along with some help from the Washington State Department of Commerce to get us started, even well before the Hydrogen Hub opportunity actually came into being. And I'm excited to answer this question because it's really a key part of why we got Charge started in the first place, which was to really bring together all the folks that want to participate in the hydrogen ecosystem. And this concept is something that cluster organizations are geared towards trying to address universally. So cluster organizations typically focus on new nascent economic sectors like the hydrogen economy or many other clean tech sectors where there hasn't really been enough connection or collaboration or existing business relationships to help it take off. And so those clusters step in to help identify entrepreneurs, corporate partners, investor capitals, academic research institutions, and government entities that can really help to build that new economic sector. And so that's what an innovation cluster is focused on doing, and that's what Charge is focused on doing in the hydrogen economy specifically. So I wanted to highlight that, the question is asking, what kinds of business organizations, and I wanted to just I don't want to spend a whole ton of time on the hydrogen value chain because I'm going to post a link in the chat that shows where Charge explains that and outlines how all the different types of businesses can connect into this hydrogen ecosystem and into the Hydrogen Hub and the Charge network. So that link is in the chat, and it basically highlights a snapshot of our existing database of all the different folks that we've already connected with. So you can use this as a tool to help find other potential partners or companies that you might want to get in touch with. But I also just wanted to highlight that these are all the folks that we've spoken with and worked with and talked to. So it's not just scraping the internet and trying to find all the different electrolyzer producers in the world. These are companies that we know and have looked into and have learned something about. And we would invite you all to do the same. So I think this is a really core part of how we want to help engage and connect people to the Hydrogen Hub. You can connect to Charge through the Charge website there in the chat or through the Hydrogen Hub. And we'll incorporate your information into our CRM. We're tracking all this information. We're highlighting what we know about each individual company, and we're using to help make connections, connect folks to communities, to Hydrogen Hub projects, to those RFPs or funding opportunities that we see either through the Hydrogen Hub or otherwise through federal and state opportunities, and really just trying to bring the entire ecosystem together through this innovation cluster organization. So I think hopefully that covers it, and I'll pass it back to you, Janine.
Great, thanks, Aaron. Our next question is also on this topic, a little more specific. How can my business or organization help fund the hub? How can my business or organization become a recipient of funds from the hub? And then will accepting any funds from the hub trigger the National Environmental Protection Act? So for this question, I'm going to ask Mark Gerboth, the Project Management Office lead for the hub, to take to provide us with a response.
Super. Well, thanks, Janine. And again, yeah, I'm Mark Gerboth. I'm a senior director with Adkins Realis, and I'm the person who runs the project management organization for the Pacific Northwest Hydrogen Hub. So as of now, all of the federal funds have been subscribed to our 17 projects, so there are no federal funds available. However, we do anticipate that as this 8-year process goes along, there are going to be some projects as they go through their planning who determine that the project that they had proposed is not going to be viable and may exit the hub. In which case there may be an opportunity for others to join and participate and also get a portion of the federal funding as well. How you do that is really to stay engaged with Aaron Fever and the folks at Charge, because they are the ones who are kind of keeping their finger on the pulse of what's going on in the hydrogen network in the Pacific Northwest. And so that'll be the first point of contact that we would turn to identify potential replacement projects that could come into the hub. A question was asked in the chat if you had to be a U.S. entity to be able to participate. The formal requirements are that you be a U.S. entity. However, OSED does have a waiver process whereby foreign entities can be recipients of the federal funding stream. So if that's something that's of concern to you, and you need to know more about what that waiver process looks like, again, reach out to us and we can provide some additional detail on that. And then will accepting any funds from PNWH2 trigger the National Environmental Protection Act? The answer to that is yes. The Department of Energy has determined that they need to go through a NEPA process to be able to award funds to the hub and to the various subrecipients in the hub. So if you do end up participating in the hub and receiving federal funding, be prepared to have to go through NEPA. I think that's it, Janine.
Thanks, Mark. And Mark, you used an acronym there, OSED. I'm wondering if you can just spell that out for folks who may not be familiar.
Sorry, yes. So OSED is the Office of Clean Energy Demonstrations. That's the office within the Department of Energy that is the customer and also the provider of the federal funding.
Great, thanks for that.
Janine, may I just add something to what Mark was talking about?
Sure.
And Mark, thanks a lot. I'm glad you mentioned Charge. I'm glad Aaron's on too. But if anybody out there is just continuing to ask, hey, how do I get involved? How do I be a part of this? How do I, maybe get some resources or some value? There certainly is sort of the direct way to get resources that folks are asking about, like, how do I get some grant money or money from the hub? And I'm glad, Mark, you covered sort of what our current situation is there. But it's not just about grant funding right now from the federal government. There could be lots of different ways to participate in the development of the hydrogen economy. There's more than ever before. There's more private capital crossing international borders being invested in clean energy. Hydrogen is a very popular place right now for lots of investment from lots of places. You've got all these other governments. You've got all these private, banks and venture capital groups and putting money out there. There are also opportunities to sell products. And so there are ways to get value. And we talk to companies all the time, not about getting free federal grant money, but finding customers, getting contracts. Yeah. So there's lots of other ways I think that this whole marketplace might yield some value for companies that have interests or products that are part of this value chain. So getting in touch with Charge, I think, is a really great idea. I just want to make sure folks don't limit their thinking only to how do I get a federal grant? Everybody loves a federal grant. They can be a lot more than they are bargained for sometimes with all the work we have to do to manage them. But there are other ways to participate. The bigger point is we are in a growth phase right now for hydrogen, and it's going to be bumpy, and it's not going to be a constant sort of upward growth curve. It's going to undulate a little bit, but it is a good opportunity right now to start that process if you haven't already. And Charge is a great entry point to coordinate with our hub. So Mark, I'm glad you covered all that. I just wanted to make that other point of other ways you can enter and try to get some value out of this. Thanks, Janine.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Chris. One of the things I just wanted to highlight, the Department of Energy wants us to help achieve market liftoff, they call it. And that's a key part of what we are trying to achieve. We view the Hydrogen Hub as a great starting point, but there's a ton of opportunities out there, and we really want to help everyone, expand their business and grow and succeed in the hydrogen economy in many different ways. So thanks again for highlighting that, Chris.
Thanks, Chris and Aaron, for jumping in there. If we can move on to the next question. So one of the things that was very attractive about the Pacific Northwest region for our hub is clean, renewable energy. And so this question that came in is, will there be sufficient renewable electricity to generate green electrolysis only hydrogen on site, or will steam methane reforming, which is another way of making hydrogen, will that be required on site? And so for this question, I'm going to ask Steve Schoeneman, the Hydrogen Development Manager for Puget Sound Energy, to respond.
Yes, thank you, Janine. This is a really fascinating topic, and in looking at how green hydrogen fits into the broader effort around Washington, Oregon, and the Pacific Northwest in general to decarbonize. It will require additional renewable energy. As Chris mentioned earlier, when we first kicked it off, we are really solely focused on electrolysis at this point. The steam methane reformation may have a place in a decarbonized economy in other parts of the nation. And I know OSED is funding some hubs that are more focused on that. So it would be good to see some of that development take place. We're going to have to look at how the demand for green hydrogen really squares up with other hard to decarbonize sectors and look at it from a really total load perspective. So, electrification of transportation, how do we do sustainable aviation fuels? What about sustainable maritime fuels? All of those are, and I'll really start with having an abundance of electrical energy and really renewable energy. So that's really a regional question for policymakers, for utilities, for developers, and for the major transmission organizations like Bonneville Power Authority, really sort of getting our hands around what's the size of the demand 10, 20, 30 years out. The hub will get us going, but to really reach scale, we are going to need more renewable energy. That can take, and how we can move renewable energy really is a story about transmission pipelines as well as electric transmission lines. There's a future where both will be required. Probably too early to tell how big and in what proportion each one of those is going to be, but we are going to need a lot of new energy on the grid here in the not too distant future.
Thanks, Steve. Definitely a challenge beyond just this hub, but certainly one that we are all dealing with. Okay, next question, please. I'm going to ask Chris Green to cover this one. You talked about it a bit in your opening remarks, but hoping you can elaborate on how the hub will prioritize hydrogen for use in hard to decarbonize sectors.
It's a really good question. It comes up a lot. Thanks, Janine. When we started our hub, one of the first things I remember hearing about or sort of one of the impetus is, I suppose, or one of the drivers of getting it started was a letter from Governor Inslee that said, hey, we want to go after this hydrogen hub money. Please go try to get a group together and go figure that out and see if we can get some of that money. And, our leaders, certainly on the West Coast and lots of other people that focus on hydrogen quite a bit, understand some of the things that Steve was just talking about. We have a certain amount of electricity right now. We want to make sure we use it as judiciously as possible because we have lots of demands. And I think folks have heard a lot about, data centers and things that have been covered in the Seattle Times over the last month or so. We do have there's a new era upon us about how we think about our grid and how we think about total energy portfolio utilization. So because of that, because of all the cars we have to electrify, because of all these data centers, and because of all the heat pumps we're putting in to try to displace other kinds of fossil fuels for various uses in homes and other places, we have to think a little bit as policymakers or as state leaders or as people that are in charge of things like this in the hydrogen hub about what's the best and proper use and what's the highest, most judicious use of these energy products. So we can make sure it's balanced and we can sort of power up all the things that we need to power in the cleanest way possible so we can achieve our climate goals. And so, hydrogen is one of the solutions for all of this decarbonization work that everybody is working on. And because we don't have an unlimited supply and because it is kind of expensive to make and takes a lot of electricity, there's lots of folks that have an interest and intention to make sure we focus on things that are really hard to decarbonize, things that you can't just plug in. So that's why, a lot of the work that we do, a lot of the work that the projects do are focused on like big trucks and big boats and big planes and big transit buses and other kinds of industrial processes that don't quite easily lend themselves to just plugging into the grid or plugging into electricity or using a battery. Certainly you can use hydrogen for passenger only vehicles and things like that. And, at some point the market will decide, or people can decide if they want to buy those cars and want to go fill up at fueling stations. But where we're spending our time is on the harder to decarbonize end uses. And what we are seeing, or at least what I am seeing, and our observations are, is that in the marketplace right now, that's mostly where the demand is coming from. And so what we really have to do here, it's not just about, all our aspirational goals about climate. It is about trying to achieve those goals in the constraints and into the context and confines of what economically will actually pencil. Okay, so we have to get hydrogen down to a price that is reasonable, and we have to convince customers to buy it. And right now, the places where we think there are customers that will buy hydrogen and make it a viable energy commodity product are those harder to decarbonize uses. And so that's where our focus has been. I think there's a great opportunity to keep driving toward that with that sort of that mindset of these hard to decarbonize end uses, because I think that's where we can get the most market lift off or most product uptake and offtake by customers in those places. So that's our focus. That's what we've been working on quite a bit. I know lots of policymakers think about these kinds of things too, and prioritizing hydrogen for hard to decarbonize. And the truth is, that seems like where the market is headed. And so I think we're in a good spot and have a really good opportunity to keep driving toward those solutions and using hydrogen in the places where we really need it to achieve our decarbonization goals. So there's a little bit of a reflection on that, Janine.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate it. All right, next question. How will the Pacific Northwest Hydrogen Hub mitigate the impacts of hydrogen production on a limited water supply in the region? Can you discuss more about the processed water, requirements for water quality, and quantity consumption? So I'm going to go ahead and take this question to start with, but I'll ask I'll ask for my co-panelists to add anything if they would like to. But it is a good question because obviously the production of hydrogen does take a lot of water. In fact, it takes around 15 to 20 kilograms or about 5 gallons of water to produce 1 kilogram of hydrogen, if you include the additional water that's required for cooling and maintenance and other things. So the good news is that electrolyzers, which is a type of technology, as Steve talked about, that will be used to produce hydrogen in our hub, electrolyzers can use potable or non-potable water. So that means they can use recycled water from wastewater treatment plants or desalinated seawater hydrogen or another type of non-potable water. So to summarize, for hydrogen production, including water purification, it will take a little over 3 gallons of water per kilogram of hydrogen. And depending on the system and the time of year, cooling water may be necessary, and that would increase the water requirements to about 5 gallons of water for each kilogram of hydrogen. Now that sounds like a lot, but I want to put the number into perspective because hydrogen is not the only energy resource that uses water. A lot of energy generation is very water intensive. So for example, it takes a lot of water to produce gasoline, and moving a vehicle using gasoline actually takes more water than moving a vehicle using a hydrogen fuel cell. So in terms of the water use by the projects in our hub, we did some quick math and figured that the entire hub would use about 3 Olympic-sized swimming pools worth of water a day. And that is the same as 200 acres of typical irrigated Eastern Washington farmland. So it's significant water use, but it's not actually inconsistent with other existing uses in the region. And then in terms of mitigating the impacts, each project in the hub is working to secure water rights and will, of course, comply with relevant regulations on water use in the area that they're developing the project. And in general, our projects are also working to recycle as much of the water as possible, which will lower the amount of water required from what I mentioned earlier. And I'll also say water is likely to be a topic discussed with communities during phase 1 of this project. So I'll look to see if any of my colleagues have anything to add. If not, I will move on to our final question preloaded. Okay, so this one is from a community college, which was interested in learning more about the hub's plan to address workforce development needs to supply an adequate number of well-qualified middle-skilled candidates for private and public employers. Kate McAteer, can you take this question, please?
Yeah, thanks, Janine. And thank you to whomever submitted that question. Love questions about education. Our community benefits commitment is to, as we said earlier, creating and supporting high quality jobs for the hydrogen economy in the Pacific Northwest. And to do that, we are going to establish an education and training work group that will include labor unions, K-12, community and technical colleges, universities, and also then input from workforce development councils, hydrogen producers, users, and manufacturers to make sure that we're meeting their needs. And in that process, we understand that a skilled and technical workforce is going to be needed for in our projects. And the community college programs are going to be led by the Pacific Northwest Center for Excellence. For the Pacific Northwest Center of Excellence for Clean Energy at Centralia College, which is led by Director Monica Brummer. And obviously that is a Washington state-based program, but we intend to align any trainings, curriculum development, educational requirements with our community and technical college partners in Oregon and Montana. So I really encourage you to fill out the interest form if you're from a community college at our website. Leave your contact information and we will be reaching out to you when we begin to establish that working group.
Great, thank you, Kate. So we actually have time for maybe one question that's come in during the webinar, and we will do our best to respond to all of these in writing afterwards. But I did see a few questions being asked about sort of next steps, how the phase one funding is going to be rolled out, how much is going to be passed through to industry partners, when can we expect to see some of these projects actually going through groundbreaking? When are we anticipating projects going through the NEPA process? So I will ask Chris or Mark if you can answer those questions and talk a little bit about next steps in phase one.
Hey, Mark, if you don't mind, maybe I'll just go real high level, and then you can catch me up if I miss something. But just for everybody listening, phase one that we've just started, really a lot of that is about design, engineering, planning, and then very importantly, the environmental regulatory processes. And so we are just starting our work on NEPA. Everybody has to go through that, and that'll take a little bit of time. We've got state regulations as well in various locations, so we have to sort of overcome those hurdles and make sure we meet all the standards that we have to. And lots of projects are still working on sort of, the design and those kinds of things. And so phase one really is not a lot of construction. It's not where most of the money gets spent. I think some folks have noted or seen that the first tranche, so to speak, from DOE to our hub is around $27 million. And so, that's going to go, a lot of that will go to projects directly, but it's not sort of the biggest amounts they will get. When we start to get it to the end of phase two, and then certainly into phase three, right now, that's where we anticipate most of the money will get spent. That's when you're talking about a lot more construction, steel and pipes in the ground. That's when people will start to see dirt moving more and buildings being erected in different places. So we've got a little bit of time for that, and we don't exactly know when that will commence or by what date, but it's safe to say it's going to be a few years in most cases before projects begin to enter to those phases where they're going to do a lot more construction. So for the near term, it is a lot of planning and work to get set up, and we'll be doing more of these kinds of things to keep people posted and updated as we go. Mark, sorry I jumped out front there. If you wanted to add some color to that, please do.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good high level summary, Chris. I think the only thing I might add is that the $1 billion in federal funding is a portion of what it's going to take to execute these projects. Our private partners are putting up about 5 times that amount of money to go and execute these projects over the 8-year program. So this really is seed capital from the federal government to help jumpstart things a little bit. And our goal is obviously to flow as much of that federal funding out to the individual subrecipients, the people who are actually doing the work of the project, as we can. So right now, about 10 to 12% of the federal funds are earmarked to help support the operations of the Pacific Northwest Hydrogen Hub, with the goal, obviously, of trying to keep as much money flowing to the projects as we can, so that we can actually get the steel in the ground and get the work completed.
All right, I think we're at time. Thanks so much, Chris and Mark and everyone, for participating in the webinar, and I really appreciate those who logged on and joined us to learn more about the hub today. Appreciate your time, and I really hope you're walking away with a better understanding of our hub, and also an appreciation for how excited we are to be building this new clean energy industry in the region. So, as I mentioned, we'll be following up with a recording of the webinar and answers to the questions, both the ones that came in ahead of time and the ones that we got today. We'll do our best. There are a lot of really good questions. Appreciate people's engagement. We also invite you to stay up to date with the latest happenings on our website at pnwh2.com and our LinkedIn site. So again, thanks so much for your time this morning, and hope you have a great rest of your day.